swing and a drive. Right field and deep. Back goes Aquino. It's got a chance. Gone. Get out the tape measure. Long gone.
Fly the W!
Cubs fans, it's time to fly the W with Dustin Rhodes and Paul Crawly Jean.
All right, Crawly, welcome to another edition of the Fly the W podcast. It is season 4, and we come to you on this Tuesday afternoon, and not the greatest night, Monday for Cub Nation, Crawly.
No. It was a frustrating game up in above the Cheddar Curtain. I'm in Wisconsin right now. I've had my brother in town and my nephew and niece. They're in for a short time, and Dustin and I sitting there, and we knew this day was coming, right? I mean, there was kind of that cryptic post right around the All-Star break about trying to enjoy the days and all this stuff, and I think we all knew it was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. Even when I'm not podcasting or tweeting or something, I always have Cubs baseball. It's always been the background of my life, and for my family and everything, my brother, my dad, all of us kind of hanging out. And I was sitting there yesterday, and I got a text from someone close to Ryno around 6 p.m. saying that he's gone. And that one, the text said he's gone, and kind of it's not known yet. The Cubs are gonna make an announcement, and I was figuring it might be after the game, but I figured if it's starting to get around, they would eventually do it. And so I was listening to the game on 670 The Score when they made the announcement, probably around 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it was about that fifth-ish, sixth-ish inning, I think, timing of the game. Yeah, it was rough. Knew it was coming, in air quotes, but you're still never ready because it sounded like he was in rough shape in the past, and he was able to rebound. But there were definitely some things said, some indications that this time it wasn't going to happen like it did in the past. It was a matter of when, not if, it was going to happen. So it was really sad. I thought both Pat and Ron and Zach did a great job. I thought I've been listening on the app and watching the game a lot lately, so I'm kind of taking in both broadcasts at the same time. And it was rough. And Marquis was definitely prepared. Had a bunch of great graphics and a bunch of great statistics showing how great Sandberg was.
Yeah, this was one that they put up: 10-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glover, 7-time Silver Slugger, 2,386 hits, 282 home runs, 1,318 runs, 344 stolen bases, 1984 NL MVP. And he was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2005. And Dustin, those numbers, they don't even really tell the whole picture. It was for I grew up as a kid, right? And just idolizing Sandberg. And that's what I think for you and me and guys of a certain age, when I think about Ernie Banks or Fergie or Billy Williams, I love them, but I never saw them really play, right? I caught the tail end of Fergie, I think in 83, but in general, that wasn't it. Sandberg was like our original guy. And
right. You basically saw his whole career.
I saw his whole career, and I thought the Cubs put out a really beautiful message, talking about all of this, about, Tom Ricketts having just some words. And again, the thing that's hard is that he was such a loving husband to Margaret, the children, especially the grandchildren. Right away, of course, like you said, Pat and Ron did a great job. When I was listening to Pat, though, you could hear it in his voice, as much as he was trying to call the game, and the game got away from the Cubs, but you could tell how moved he was.
It became secondary. It totally became secondary. I mean, typically when they're telling a story, right, and they're calling the game, when something happens in the game, they put a pause on the story, right, and then they continue to the action, right? This they did not do. No. They stayed on Sandberg. They both knew him very well, both Pat and Ron and Zach. I mean, there was a time during the run to the World Series that Sandberg was doing a whole bunch of post games with Mark Grody in the radio booth, and he would sit in the stands like a regular fan, like you and I, and then he'd come up into the booth and do a post game show with Zach with Mark Grody.
I remember those. Those were great.
So, he an all-star player, also obviously got into broadcasting, was a manager, was a coach, so was able to do it all.
Ryno is the GOAT of second baseman. Rip23 says, I was at the Milwaukee game last night and don't even remember the last 4 innings. Most of us behind the Cubs dugout were numb. Hashtag Ryno forever. I couldn't even imagine being at the game, Dustin. I don't even know if I could have handled it, to be honest with you.
That would have been pretty rough. It might have been therapeutic, depending on how everybody processes things different, obviously. It potentially could have been therapeutic from the standpoint of having great Cub fans to be around and to talk to. I texted with a couple of people, but the texts were short. We're all kind of the same age, and it really made you kind of feel old, to be honest, right? It made you feel old that a guy like that you kind of grew up watching and rooting for had passed away. And 65 nowadays, it's not that old.
No, and our friends over at Autograph One, they do all the memorabilia signings with Pat Hughes, and they do a great job. Fantastic. But it says, I texted with Pat this morning, and Pat shared it was a very difficult night. When you're talking about a Hall of Famer like Pat Hughes, I heard him talking last night about how Ryno came back to baseball right when Pat Hughes came back to the Cubs. Remember, Ryno retired.
Like the same time. And,
yeah, they retired. And so, Pat was excited to be able to call some of Ryno's games. And like when you talk about therapeutic, you can see they had it on the marquee last night, Ryno Sandberg. And then they had only the 23 flag up. Normally they have all the flags of the retired players up. And you can see here, Marquis put this up earlier. This is the statue outside of the Gallagher Way building. And they have obviously a picture of Ryno up there and all the flowers and a 23.
Well, it started with a single rose last night. First time they showed it on Marquee, there was just a single rose. And I have to give, I just saw a tweet from our guy, Bruce Levine. They have to give a tip of the cap to the Brewers. They are going to hold a moment of silence tonight for Ryne Sandberg. So that's a classy move by them in a rivalry that has become fairly heated over the last couple of years. The fan bases don't exactly love each other with the whole Wrigleyville North and whatnot. And also there's a good chance that the patch that they're going to wear for the remainder of the season will make its debut on Cubs players tonight as well.
It'll be interesting to see, but I think about, like we were talking about earlier, for us, Ryno was the guy that we watched his whole career. This is a picture of me right here in the bleachers in 1983, me and my dad with a big giant Cubs pin on.
Love it.
And like I said, man, like Ryno was my guy, and 84 was just a miraculous season. I think about like the 3 guys I remember, like the 3 guys that really I just got hooked. It was Ryno, Jody, and Sutcliffe. Those were the 3 guys that I thought were just amazing. And I'm sure you were in the same place I was, sitting in front of probably a big box TV, the NBC Game of the Week, June 23rd, 1984, the Sandberg game. This is a picture from my memorabilia collection. 5 for 6, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs. And that was a game that just really cemented that team. That's when all of a sudden you felt like this team has the magic, right? I've seen good teams, I've seen bad teams, but I've seen very few teams that have had that magic that go on just what seems to be like the baseball gods are smiling in your favor. And boy, that was one hell of a year. That's when he really broke out and was the MVP that year. And, take a look at his postseason numbers. Unfortunately, Sandberg only had 2 really cracks at the postseason. He was like a 380 hitter.
He delivered in the postseason as well.
Yeah,
absolutely. He had great postseason numbers. I don't know. I know you're kind of on vacation, wrapping up your summer before you get back to all those snot-nosed kids in high school or wherever it is you teach our future bosses, Crawly. But we did have Pat Hughes on the Mully and Haw show today. Pat was excellent as always. So if listeners of this podcast didn't have a chance to hear it, go back. Also, we had a very surprise caller, Crawly.
Who was
Somebody
that?
you introduced me to, and you're going to want to go back and listen to the conversation. It's about 8:44 this morning. A guy named Lou called in. Lou Sella, the sculptor, called in to talk about how honored and great it was to work with Ryne Sandberg on that statue. So Lou Sella called in. We also obviously talked to Bruce Levine. Great interview this morning. And we also talked to the first half of the Daily Double. Bobby Denier joined the show. And pretty emotional night for him as well. So a lot of guys will be jumping on the score today. Lots of remembrances. It'll be interesting to see, what happens this weekend, right? The Cubs return home this weekend, how things are handled during that. Heard from, I thought the skipper, Craig Counsell, did a great job answering questions about Sandberg post-game. That game became so secondary to Cubs Nation, even though it was a total clunker. We'll talk about that at some other point in time. But Craig handled it very well and talked about the importance, and it was a big deal a year ago this summer. When was it? Was it August or September, Crawly? When was the statue dedication?
That was June 23rd, 2024.
Oh, okay. So over a year ago then now.
Yeah.
The whole Cubs team went out and watched the ceremony at the request of Craig Counsell and talked about how it was important, why it was important that the players do that.
Yeah, and this is another one. I know Bruce Levine put this up, and this was the text that I got last night that said it as well, that he passed away at 5:23. So that number 23, always obviously big in our hearts. That was a comment from my friend Katrina. Good to hear.
Great comment. And speaking of the 23, I mentioned this on the air this morning, the fact that he was the first. Every franchise except potentially the Blackhawks. I'm not great on Blackhawks numerology. I have a couple. I have a couple of those ideas, but you got Jordan after him, you got Hester after him, you got Robin Ventura after him. So the number 23, a great number in Chicago sports.
Well, this is a piece from my memorabilia collection. I was at this game. This, I believe it was June 23rd as well, when they retired his jersey at Wrigley Field. And this is a picture with Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, Ryno, Ron Santo, autographed, all of it. But I look at that picture right there, and the only one left with us is Billy. It feels hard, but I was, the thing about Ryno is that you could see him. I feel like early in his career, during his playing career, there's a lot of stories about Ryno. His dad, his dad was worked at a funeral home, owned a funeral home. And so obviously, at that funeral home, there was a lot, you needed to be quiet a lot, right? Because there was wakes going on, and Ryno was, in the funeral home was they lived attached to the house. And, he was very quiet, I feel like, during his playing career. He wasn't as outspoken kind of guy. But I feel like later on, I think being a manager, and he wanted to be a manager. He managed for the Cubs minor league system. Unfortunately, he didn't get the crack, but he did with his former team, the Phillies. But I think being a manager really kind of opened him up a little bit and made him more comfortable in a speaking role. You were mentioning, how he used to be on those post games with Mark Grody after the postseason games. But, the cool thing is I feel like he really opened up and smiled a lot and was friendly. I feel like his relationship with the fans and the comfortability in his own skin really improved after that. This is another piece from my memorabilia collection. I did go to the Field of Dreams game against the Reds when they had that. And that was phenomenal. And to see Lee Smith and Ryno and Billy and Andre and Fergie right there, that's all signed. But seeing those guys walk out of the corn before the game, along with Johnny Bench and Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr. were there. I mean, it was just such an amazing moment. And Sandberg was part of so many of those. I want to say he threw out the first pitch in Game 5 of the World Series. I don't think you can get a bigger game than that, right?
No bigger moment, Crawly. And It's it is sad, but he, if you're too young or if you're too old now and you're forgetting about seeing Ryne Sandberg play, or if you want to learn more about Ryne Sandberg playing, go to YouTube. All kinds of videos, all kinds of game footage out there. Listen back to his Hall of Fame speech, one of the better ones you will ever hear. The message was fantastic. He probably could have been an all-star third baseman, probably could have been an above-average shortstop. Was the throw-in with Larry Boa coming from the Phillies for Ivan DeJesus, right? He was the throw-in.
Right.
He was just the extra guy, and he struggled when he first got to the Cubs. But speaking of, Crawly, you mentioned about coaching and then managing. Do you think the reason he never got the opportunity to manage the Cubs is because the Cubs never wanted to have to fire him, and every manager you hire, you end up firing?
I think that really probably does have a lot to do with it. When you think about it, most Hall of Famers don't go the route of Sandberg, where he literally was one of those, if you're a single low A manager or high A, double A, those stuff, you're not just a manager. You're literally like the grounds crew. You're everything else. Like he literally paid his dues. And
riding the buses,
sleeping
in the Motel 6s, all that kind of jazz.
Right. And so I as much as it frustrated me that he didn't get a shot, let's take, for example, David Ross, right? Next year, Dustin, it's hard to believe, 2026, 10-year anniversary of the 2016 World Series. And I can tell you who's probably not going to show up at CubsCon and other events. We're probably not going to see David Ross.
Any idea? I mean, has he popped his head up out of the foxhole? What's he up
He's
to?
going to be coaching Team USA Baseball. He's part of,
he's going to be on DeRosa's staff.
Yeah,
but
staff.
But that would be the first thing. I mean, I have not heard a peep.
I think he was on he was on Apple TV, Friday Night Baseball.
No.
He hasn't done much, but that's the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that, like, how could you have like a 2016 reunion without David Ross, right? Grandpa Rossi was like a big storyline, but I mean, he got fired. I mean, basically he was told he was coming back. Then Craig Counsell came, Jed Hoyer makes an end around, gets him, and then he has to go down to Florida and fire David Ross. I mean, that's bad feelings. You know what I mean? And I don't know if he's ready to come back, especially with Craig and Jed both there. So I think in a way we kind of got saved because, Ryno's managerial record with the Phillies wasn't the greatest, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, but I'm glad that he never had people kind of, talking about, like, just the way you heard people talking about David Ross, right? You didn't want to hear that about Ryno because of being larger than life. And you mentioned Lou Cella, the sculptor. Lou Cella is the one that has sculpted all the statues at Wrigley Field. He's done them at Comiskey. When I went to Detroit, he did them up there. He did the huge Kobe Bryant one. There's a huge Barry Sanders in Detroit. One of the most talented sculptors that's out there. And this is in, I think, December 2023, Dustin. I get a text from Lou. He says, "Crawly, do you want to come visit my studio?" And I said, yeah, I'd love to visit your studio. Absolutely. He says, so I go out to his studio in the northern suburbs, on the lakefront. And he takes me around and I'm seeing all these statues everywhere, literally. Now I had to give him my phone. I couldn't have my phone with me, right?
Yep. Because
it was very secretive. And so I sat there and Lou takes me into his the special part of the studio. And he's like, "Are you ready to see it?" And I knew he meant the Ryno statue. And I said, "Yeah." And there's a whole process that he goes through to do it. And I looked around, and all around were pictures of Ryno from that era, in the 1984 specifically. Pictures everywhere, like a hat, a Ryno. Like, so I'm sure Lou told you guys on the air, Ryno was very, very involved in his statue. Would come in like at least once or twice a week. To kind of, talk, he was looking for those flip shades, which ironically enough are going to be the giveaway on Friday at Wrigley Field. But looking for those flip shades, looking for the glove from '84 so that Lou looking for the game worn shoes, all that stuff. So Lou could have all the little details. And so I was at all the statue dedication ceremonies. The only one I missed was Harry Carey. I was in college when Harry was dedicated. But I was at all the other ones, Ernie, Billy, Ryan, Ronnie, Fergie. And so I had seen what the statues looked like finish, but I had never really kind of like been as close as I was when all of a sudden I walked in, and this is what I saw was this just amazing statue of Ryno. And so if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, there's me, and there's the statue that everyone knows now. And they use this clay, and then they put like a bronze mold over it and crack it. There's a whole process that Lou, he talked about it on the Fly the W podcast. But he says to me, Crawly, do you want to draw a pinstripe? I said, are you serious? I'm like, I never got above a C in art class, Dustin. I can't draw. I can't draw worth a damn. I'm the one that the teacher would always make rewrite their homework because my handwriting was so sloppy. And so I went to this side table, and, my hand's kind of like shaking, and I'm like, oh. So we got a couple tries, and eventually I got it done. So if you go to the Ryno statue, right where the Angry Bear patch is, those are the lines that I did going down from the Angry Bear from the bicep. And so, he took pictures. These are loose pictures. These are not mine because I didn't have my phone on me. And he said, I'll send them to you, Crawly, after the ceremony's over. Because I was like, all right, I trust you. But he's like, there's no way I want these, getting out. And, a lot of times there's discussions. What should the statue, what should the pose be? And if you went to the day of the Santo or the Sandberg ceremony, they had two pictures, one of them batting and one of them fielding. They didn't tell anybody. They wanted to make it a surprise. And so if you remember, I got to be there that day and cover it for this podcast. This was like so if you could see right there where it says Ryne Sandberg on that little seal, you can see the two different poses that they looked at, and they decided on doing the fielding poses. And he had his grandchildren grow up and hit the button and the confetti and everything. And, this is where we see the statue right now. And that's what it looked like. And it just was amazing. And Sean Dunston and Larry Boa and Bob Costas, all of them gave speeches that day. And the tough thing, Dustin, was that, and this is a picture I took when I was, in the scrum right there. But the thing about the whole thing is that at this time, it was the belief that he had beaten it, right? He was cancer free. And I believe he was on with Lawrence Holmes when he was discussing that.
He came on and I kind of broke that news. That news that he rang the bell and he was feeling great. And he got emotional when he shared the news on the score. It's a tough thing. He's a tough guy. I'm glad, Larry Boa, Larry obviously was on the station today as well. And Larry said that he wouldn't be surprised if Sandberg waited until after Hall of Fame weekend for his passing, that he pushed hard because he did not want to have any distractions from this class, that he did not want to go the week of leading into it, or, the day of, or even the day after, so that class got all the attention that they deserved. And I thought, wow, what a powerful comment. I don't know. Did you get to hear Sean Dunston on the MLB Network? You see that piece of audio floating around yet?
Yeah, I did.
Talking about having a conversation with himself and Mark Grace and was it Sutcliffe? Who else? There was a third member in
it was Dawson, Dunston, and Grace.
Dawson, Grace. Yep. And telling them how much he loved them and how special their relationship was, and that he loved all the Cub fans. So that was pretty powerful too. And Dunston just completely broke down. I mean, the job that I have, my, regular 9 to 5 or big boy job, as people like to say, is producing for the score and producing for Mully and Haw. And so I was compiling numbers. I was chasing numbers. You and I were texting about potential guest ideas and contacts. And it was 9 something at night when I'm reaching out, obviously still the news very fresh, didn't feel comfortable calling. So I was only texting, and I got a couple of texts kind of overnight. So then I had to wait until this morning. At about 7:30, I started calling guys again, like Larry Boa, like Andre Dawson, to start setting things up for my show in the station today.
Yeah, and really, between the score and Marquee, everyone's just been doing such a great job, and you really kind of feel how loved he is, and especially I've had, especially on my my Twitter account, Crawly's Cubs, I've had just so many people, especially cancer survivors and stuff like that, just tell me how Ryno was such an inspiration for them, and he MLB always does that stand up for cancer. We talked about it with the All-Star break, and for me, Ryno was always on my mind when I was seeing that and hearing that. And you mentioned the Hall of Fame. The head of the Hall of Fame brought up Ryno's speech that you talked about earlier, about how every one of the players behind her played the game the way that Ryno described it, the only way that they know how, playing it with integrity, playing it for the team, those type of things. And that's who Sandberg was. That's what he did. And, it's hard because, like you said, 65 doesn't seem very old.
No, I'm saying, think of yourself. You're spending time with your family right now. You talked about your brother in town with his family. I thought the same thing talking about this with people. It's like, okay, I'm of a certain age and I grew up watching Sandberg play. So he's definitely older than me, but I'm closer to 65 than I am to 35. Right. So it's like, geez, like, how much time do any of us have? Time might be the greatest resource other than water, maybe, out there. Water so you can live, and time, of course, so you can be alive. But it's just it's really hard. Crawly, does it make it any easier because we kind of knew it was coming? Like, you didn't just wake up one day and it was like, holy Nikes, that just happened. Does it?
Yeah,
does it make it any? It's never going to be easy, no matter what, right?
So,
but is it a little bit easier?
Probably a little bit easier, I would say. But more than anything, I'm thinking about Cubs Convention 2025, and the big story was Sammy Sosa's back, right? Sammy's back, and everybody knew that the ovation Sammy was going to get. We talked about it on this show. What's the ovation going to be when Sammy gets there? How loud? The room is going to blow up. And there I was, first row. Sammy comes out with the American flag. The place blows up, and it was amazing. But Ryne at that time had already, announced that his cancer had returned. And I've been to over 20 some, I don't even know how many Cubs cons. I can't even count, to be honest with you. And I've seen Ryno, I think, I'm trying to remember when he came back, or I think around like 2014, 20. There was that period where he was with the Phillies and he wasn't at Cubs convention. But I've seen him in so many Cubs conventions before, but this was different. And when he came out, they played My Hero by the Foo Fighters. And the applause and the standing ovation that Ryno got in that moment is something I'll never forget. And he, I don't know if Marquis going to go back and show this or whatnot, but he's walking and they have a lot of the older players like sitting down in front. Your Sutcliffes, your Dawsons, your Billies, they're all in the front, especially the Cubs Hall of Famers. They put them front and center and literally just hugging every one of them. And the way that he looked at the crowd, the way that he kind of was just floating around that entire Cubs convention, it was different. He was really absorbing it. He was really soaking it in. And my friend Wayne Messmer, he does Cubs Con Bingo, which, we've talked about before. And Ryno said, Wayne, all these years of Cubs Con, you're talking 1986, I want to say, all these years of Cubs Con, I've never been to Cubs Con Bingo. And that's when, Wayne, of course, says, well, come on by, Ryno, come join us. And I just remember, I'm sitting there and we have a front center table over for Cubs Con Bingo. We're ready. And Ryno had never, there'd been a couple players that have come, and sat and played a couple games like John Lieber and other guys that, most people aren't going to bother. Right. But all of a sudden I remember being at Cubs Con Bingo And all of a sudden in my back left corner, I hear all this rustling and people getting up and turning around. And it was something I'd never, and I was like, what the heck? And all of a sudden it was like a wave of people standing up, like dominoes, like standing up, but like reverse dominoes, just getting up from their tables, and they're not paying attention to Wayne. They're not paying attention to bingo. They're paying attention to something back there. And I take a look, and there's Ryno walking across the back, and literally like stops everything stops, and the room just explodes, and everyone gets up, and he comes up, and he comes up, and the place is just going nuts. And the Cubs had found out that Ryno was the Cubs charities found out that Ryno was going to be at Cubs bingo, and that's who throws the Cubs con bingo is Cubs charities. And so they got 2 Ryne Sandberg jerseys.
Wow.
And so they got it. And so Wayne, if you go to Cubs con bingo, Wayne is the guy, they always auction off different pieces. They auction off tons of stuff to raise money for Cubs charity. So like usually every 2 or 3 games they'll auction something. And Sandberg's coming out there, and he sits there, and Wayne says, we're going to auction this autographed Ryne Sandberg 23 jersey. And the place just goes nuts. Now, I know a lot of the people that go there, and then they are the big dogs. They're what we call the whales. They're guys that they will drop a lot of money on these CubsCon auctions because they're unique, one-of-a-kind items. And I just remember, again, just Sandberg's face as he walked through the crowd. And then he ends up, then he takes the jersey and he's holding it up and he puts it on. And then he yells at Wayne, as they're auctioning, tell him it's game worn now. And so we had the winner on the podcast. I want to say it went for like $13,000. And Wayne Messmer said to the second place guy, hey, are you willing to go match that, do your previous bid, which was like $12,500. And the guy said, yeah. And they had the second Ryne Sandberg jersey. So I'll remember, like I said, what scared me more than anything is when I saw him at CubsCon bingo, there's, I love Cubs and I love music. And one time Warren Zevon, the great musician, Werewolves of London and Lawyers, Guns and Money fame, he was on David Letterman's show. And he was dying. He had cancer and he knew he was dying. I want to say he had throat cancer. And he knew he was dying. And David Letterman asked him, what have you learned from this experience? And, and Warren Zevon says, enjoy every sandwich. And that's typical Warren Zevon humor. And, it's one of those things that you think about and you say to yourself, like you talked about earlier, just about time. Yep. And sometimes we just kind of rush through life and maybe we don't sit there and take enough time to truly enjoy everything. And you don't think about doing it until you're running out of time.
Right. Then you're going backwards, right? Thinking woulda, shoulda, coulda. So speaking of time, everybody's time is important. Sandberg did it really well. I think he squeezed every bit out of it. So that should be the advice to everybody listening. Go out there, do everything you can, be a pro like Sandberg was, total pros pro, total pros pro. Let's hope that Cubs players take a little bit, put the words into motion, a couple of big games to go against the Brewers. Hopefully they can just throw that game away, clunker for Matt Boyd, and get the next 2 and then get back home. And everybody can try to remember Sandberg together at Wrigley Field this weekend.
Yeah, I'll be there Friday. So if anyone's going to be around, I'd love to say hi and see how it's going. And hopefully everybody, like I said, just hug the ones closest to you because, you never know when it's your time. And we were blessed to have Ryne Sandberg for as long as we have him and to enjoy him and for his family, thinking about his family and his teammates. Like you said, Sean Dunston, very emotional. I've talked to a few and, it's a tough time, but that's the thing. We're a Cubs community and we're here for each other.
That's right, Crawly. All right, that's a wrap. Don't forget to download, review, subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. You've got a 5-star review in you. We'll take one of those as well, and Crawly and I will get back to you guys after this Brewers series and wrap that up for you. Crawly, try to enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Go Cubs.
all over.